Hi there once again. If this is your first series, welcome aboard. It's great to have you with us. If you are a regular viewer or listener, it's great to have you back. Now in this series, we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the fivefold equipping gifts from Ephesians 4. Now before you think this may not be for you, let me encourage you that this will be very practical, and you may be surprised to find out that you too have been gifted to serve others by equipping them.
Welcome to another one of our Leadership Matters series. This time we are taking a unique look at the fivefold gifts from Ephesians 4 and how they apply within each of our ministries. Just click the link in the description box to download our free resources or the complete workbook. You can access any of our other podcasts by going to icmcanada.org/leadershipmatters.
Now I'm fully aware that some listeners, and you may be one of them, may think this topic is for someone else. You know, if you're doing this study as part of our Christian Leadership Institute, you have a sense of a call to ministry probably already, and so have already identified maybe one or more of these equipping gifts from Ephesians 4 in your own life. Or you may already be in what some people sometimes call full-time ministry and are leading a team. But for most of us, the application may not seem as obvious. I hope in this introductory episode you'll begin to see that we all have a ministry in the body. And you may be surprised to discover that God has also gifted you in some way, large or small, to invest in others and equip them. As I've taught pastors and leaders around the world over the last few decades, I've noticed that our understanding and approach to using these 5 gifts has a huge impact in the church. But while these gifts are usually associated with leadership, I hope to expand our view of leadership and see how God may want to use each one of us. You know, since we're all called to be ministers where God has placed us, I believe the approach I will take will be a healthy way to discuss what we call ministry. My hope is that it will motivate you and enlarge your understanding of these equipping gifts, and then apply how this will affect whatever ministry God has entrusted to you. You know, in our Discipling Through Intentional Relationships and our Mentoring Through Intentional Relationships guides, we discuss the gifts in some detail and provide tools to help the mentee discover the gifts that God has given them and how to use them based on godly character. But we never really had the space there to take a deep dive into the foundational equipping gifts as listed in Ephesians 4. So I put together a workbook and a seminar 7 years ago to focus specifically on these gifts. And this is what this series here will be based upon. Now the episodes of this series are based upon the 3 chapters in the workbook, The Fivefold Ministry. The first 5 episodes cover chapter 1, which is a biblical model. Now in these beginning episodes, we will discuss how Jesus' model of servant leadership should govern the application of these gifts, as well as what authority in the body should actually look like. You know, some of this may seem a bit academic or theoretical, but it will be a very real important foundation for the rest of our series. You know, then in episodes 6 to 10, we will discuss specific individual applications of these gifts and see how these gifts should function within leadership in the church. Now, spoiler alert, it's not about bosshood, but servanthood. And finally, in episodes 11 to 16, I'll provide some tools to help you apply these principles within a local church. You know, over decades of my own ministry, which kind of began as a youth pastor in the 1980s and then kind of I was involved in several church plants, eventually moving to other countries as a cross-cultural missionary teacher. My thinking, though, over this time has kind of gone through a bit of a transition. You know, over the last couple of decades specifically, I have been able to teach these principles in seminars as well as in consultations with church teams and within various cultural contexts. So it is true that we are all building upon the work of others, and this has also been true of me. I was influenced way back in the day by Snyder's book from the 1980s. You may or may not remember The Problem with Wineskins, which was really foundational to my thinking on the need for structural change in the church to realign with good theology. You know, while I was working on my doctorate, Shine's book on organizational culture and Senge's book on systems thinking also influenced my understanding of how important structure, or to use the biblical concept, wineskins, how important that can be as it applied to our ministries. You know, other scholars' research on headship has influenced me, as well as Patrick Johnson's outline of ministry structures. Of course, there are many others along the way. So I've been thinking about this topic for many years, and before I was even introduced to Alan Hirsch's work on the subject, particularly his book 5Q. So while my spin may be a bit unique as I put these various streams together, I'm definitely standing on the shoulder of others before me. Well, it was in 2019 actually that our MCNet team, or Ministry Coaching Network, met in Wittenberg for our international consultation. Having lived in Berlin, which is only about an hour and a half away, I'd been to the city many times. But as you know, Luther's focus was on a return to a theology of salvation through faith rather than through the church. His other emphasis was a return to the first century theology of the priesthood of all believers. However, there was little, if any, real reformation of the ecclesiastical wineskins, of the real church structures of how to do the ministry. But as Jesus taught, if we do not renew the wineskins, then the new wine will be spilt on the ground. I believe this lack of focus on the wineskins means that some of Luther's new wine, over the long haul, ended up not being implemented as effective as it could have been. Well, that's just one man's opinion. But as I see it, the Protestant church carried on with many of the same church forms from the previous 1,000 years. This was reflected in a focus on church positions and offices that were mostly patterned after the institutionalized church that developed after Constantine in the early part of the 4th century. Instead of creating wineskins that reinforced the new truth or new wine, the priesthood of all believers, it seems the church kind of doubled down on clergy-laity divisions, and I believe this has directly impacted our understanding of the fivefold ministry gifts of Ephesians 4. So in this series, this is kind of what we want to focus on. Now, do you agree or disagree with this assessment, my assessment of Reformation? And maybe think about it, why or why not?
We have various free resources available. They will help you discover your own fivefold gift mix as well as that of your team. The ministry flowchart and life cycle will help you renew the wineskins of your ministry. There are links to these materials in the description box below. You can view any of Phil's other podcast series by going to icmcanada.org/leadershipmatters. These include Mentoring Intelligence, Finishing the Race, and Multicultural Teams. If you want a more comprehensive leadership training program for you or your team, check out our Christian Leadership Institute. This is a unique competency-based ministerial training, which utilizes an online platform. For any of our other resources, please visit our library at icmcanada.org/resources.
As I outlined before the break, we want to discuss in this series the fundamental way we understand the relationships in the body of Christ and how this affects how we use our gifts. You know, as Snyder and others have pointed out, this outward structure or wineskin is important and, in my opinion, one of the misplaced opportunities of the Protestant Reformation. Yet while the new forms are needed, without inward transformation, all this happens is we create new forms rather than increasing the capacity of the church to fulfill its true mission. And this transformation will need to begin with a change in our own thinking. And this happens as our mind is renewed through the Word. So this renewal process is where we'll begin in the first few episodes. I hope you hang in there with me as I lay out a biblical foundation for Christian leadership. You know, if you've been with us in other series, you'll recall that leadership's not about position, but serving others with our gifts. It's not about bosshood, it's about servanthood. We'll then discuss how leadership in this community of believers is to be quite different from those in other institutions in our society. And we need to begin there because usually we think of the fivefold gifts as related to leadership. So we will look at them through the lens of what Paul was really meaning in this passage. So to begin with, I need to provide some explanation as to the basic definition or understanding of each of the fivefold equipping gifts. For our purposes here, I'll keep the more traditional view of the equipping gifts rather than combining pastoral and teaching as one. I'm going to describe these gifts slightly different than you may have studied in the past. But if you hang with me, you'll see that this is what I believe to be true to the biblical text, as well as an approach that will foster healthier relationships within the community of believers. You know, in Ephesians 4:11 and 12, Paul writes, "So Christ himself gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the pastors, and teachers to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up." So let's briefly look at each one of these with new glasses. The first is the apostolic gifting. Literally, this means sent one and relates to the central mission of the church. It is a pioneering function of the church and has the overall purpose of aligning the wineskin of the church to fulfill its purpose. Now, the prophetic gifting is a function that focuses on maintaining the covenantal relationship with God and each member of the church, as well as an organizational perspective for the whole church to keep its covenantal focus. This gifting tend to emphasize justice, righteousness, and holiness in the church. Now, the evangelistic function emphasizes the proclamation of the good news, which is the core message of the church. Now, the primary focus of this gift is to communicate this message across all cultural, ethnic, and socioeconomic segments of society. The gift we likely have heard the most discussed is the pastoral function, as it is typically referred to with regards to the position in the church of a pastor. Now, this function in the church seeks to maintain healthy relationships and provides and protects individual members, as well as the organization as a whole. Its commitment is to spiritual growth, discipleship, and health within the context of a caring community. Now, the final gift that Paul mentions here is that of teaching. This gift is primarily concerned with wisdom and understanding, ensuring that truth is being taught at all levels of the community. This is more than just academic knowledge, but a deep desire that wisdom will be transformative in the daily lives of each member. I understand this may be a bit broader of a definition that you're used to, but in the next episodes I'll unpack and explain each of these descriptions. But how about explain your view of these equipping gifts and your experiences? How do you see them? As I wrap up this introductory episode, I should mention that in referring to the 5 gifts, apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers, I will use the term equipping gifts or fivefold ministry gifts or functions rather interchangeably. So don't get too hung up on the exact term. We've also created some resources that you may find helpful through this series. This includes a comprehensive assessment as well as a personal assessment of our understanding of these gifts. And then also a tool to help you assess your own fivefold gifting mix. As we get deeper into the study, you may also want to access the assessment tools to help you evaluate your gift mix as a team, as well as the view the equipping gifts have through the ministry flowchart and the organizational life cycle. But we'll get to all that in due time. In our next episode, we want to dig a bit deeper into the actual text in Ephesians, as well as provide a bit of context as to how we got to our current understanding of the fivefold ministry and how this may differ from the meaning in the actual biblical text. So it's going to be a great time. It's going to be a great series, and so I hope you're able to join me.
Thank you for listening to Leadership Matters and subscribing and sharing us. If you would like to have your own copy of this study, just click on the link in the description box. For any of our other leadership resources, check out our website, icmcanada.org/resources.